got into this, we got deeper into it, we've all got a little bit of concern here and there. Some people have different ones than others, but I think there's been about 4 major areas of concern. And I'm gonna start with probably our most major concern. We're on the east side of Cherry Road, backing up to Oak Court Drive. We've got a backyard that starts at about 11 to 15 feet below the street level of Oak Court Drive. When we all reached an agreement with the development originally, Cindy Reeves was one of the engineers that was involved with that, with Bill's development, when we first got started. And we all kind of worked together as a neighborhood, as a developer, and we came to a conclusion that was going to be beneficial for the neighbors as well as for the developers. Everybody worked together. It was a long job, wasn't it? But it took over a year for us to figure it all out, but we did. We figured it out. And so what they did for us on our side of Cherry Road is they gave us a buffer, and they took that level of the street, and from their side of it, they gave us a 6-foot berm, and then they put trees on top of it. And I've got a beautiful view of trees in my backyard, as do all my neighbors have down here. So the bottom of our yard is, like I said, about, for us, we're 11 feet below the street. So we're about 17 feet. The trees are on top of that, on top of the berm. So it's a really nice thing. And this was something that everybody said felt so strongly about that we read through 2 mayors, city council, land use control board. If anybody was there back then, I think some of us all were, they all remember how hard this was, but we all got it done. And everybody said, hey, we're gonna put this in the record, and y'all are gonna have that berm, and we all kind of figured we've got that protection. So now, years go by, we loved it. The mall was absolutely terrific. I mean, a little spinning ball, everything. Our kids were little. We walked over to the mall. Like I said, we've been there for almost 40 years. So we go shopping. We loved it. The mall started to deteriorate. Started getting a little worse. You'd be sitting on your backyard, you'd see a policeman chase somebody through your yard, you know. So we were all really super when it got settled. I think I speak for everybody whenever I say that we were all very happy that something was going to happen over there that was going to make it a little better community for all of us. Now, having looked at all this, I've got real concerns for us to start off with changing the berm to level it, put in 28 townhomes behind our homes, just isn't out. That's not something that I want to look at from now on and after. I went out my backyard yesterday, and I said, okay, it's pretty green back here. You know, it might not be too bad. I started walking back, and I realized all the green are the trees that are on top of the berm. So if that comes down, there won't be anything back there. We'll just be looking at the back of the house. So for us, that's a #1 concern. For some of us that live over there, the drainage is real bad. It's pretty bad. It comes off that berm, and it runs down, and it's blocked by the railroad track. And it fills our yards, and it's something we've dealt with, it's something we're happy with. Some people tell us that that can be fixed with development. You know what, we'll live with it. We're gonna be okay with water runoff. Because other people tell me it can't be fixed with development. I don't know, we would actually have to have the development done to find out if it worked or whether it didn't, and I just don't want to go there. So I think that a lot of my neighbors are in agreement that we'd rather have to burn in our runoff problems in the current yard than trying to change that. Now, one of the other concerns that we're talking about is there's a real tall building involved in this. It's 240 feet is what they're looking at, 20 stories. That's 60 feet shorter than the Statue of Liberty. And, but it's 80 feet taller than the Arc of Triomphe. 240 feet, 20 stories. Yeah, it's about the same height as the old UP building on the side of our campus. Okay.
It's
Which
4
can be seen
stories.
from a lot of places.
It's 4 stories fewer than the White Station.
So it's kind of like a round.
Don't include it's the White Station Tower, not including that. The big, not the round, it includes the round, doesn't include the little box on top.
Okay, so that's how tall it is.
Still tall.
Have we counted up?
And I was at Freddie Lyons' house on the 12 shop the other day. I'm sorry?
I'd love to know, how many stories?
20.
20 stories. Where? On this side, okay.
That's a good question. We're gonna talk to Josh about that in just a minute, about where that would be. And one of the concerns about that is the fact that it would be, I think right now the maximum height for any building in there is 4 stories. Is that right, Sid?
Right.
And I think one thing, it would be staring down at everybody if you're walking out in your backyard in various neighborhoods in the village and everywhere else. I mean, I was over at somebody's house in Wellshire, and you can see the building we were talking about from Wellshire. So you're gonna see it from a lot of spots, but it's gonna kind of stand out in comparison to those 4-story buildings that are there. I think it looked kind of odd, but there's that. And we'll get into that, and where it's gonna go, and what all of that is. Yes, ma'am?
How tall will the other buildings be?
That's a good question, because that's one of the things I kind of want to talk about, let Josh kind of address, is it's kind of vague to me because it says 240-story building, but doesn't address how many. So I'm not sure, or 240 foot, not 240 story, that is. But yeah, so it's kind of vague. There's several things that are kind of vague.
What would
It's
be in
kind of-
that building?
Excuse me?
What would be in that 20-story building?
Apartments.
So those will be the rentals?
Those would be rentals.
Well, that's not accurate.
Okay.
So the 20-story building could be condo, could be apartments, could be senior housing, could be hotel.
Which one's it?
But this is an outline plan,
Okay.
so this is simply showing where the buildings can go and the maximum height of those buildings. That's it. We're not, a final plan is when we come in, I'm sorry, I'm looking over my shoulder. A final plan, and Cindy, you can attest to this, an outline plan simply outlines where buildings can go and the uses. This isn't about specificity at this point. That comes later when we submit a final plan based on this outline plan. So a final plan is when we come, and we start doing our research, we start putting a pro forma together and saying, all right, we're gonna do 143,000 square feet, and please don't quote me on these numbers, this is just 143,000 square feet, 524 apartments, 603 condominiums, a 121 key hotel. Then we put all that together and we figure out how much we need to park, then we have to do a traffic impact study. That is the final plan process, and then the city reviews that to make sure it's in conformance with the conditions that the outline plan was approved. So this is a 2-step process, and we're not purposely trying to be vague, we're simply saying that we're not at that point yet, because.
Well, let me ask this, so does that mean that you have to go back through the land use control board the second time?
No.
So when you get it approved on the preliminary, y'all are done, now it's the city council.
Correct.
Okay.
On the outline plan, correct.
So nobody's gonna know what we're getting until it goes to city council and however they vote, we're done. So,
Well, you won't even know that city council, I mean, this is what city council is gonna be reviewing an outline plan. This is how development works.
can I ask you something, Sid? So, how often do you see developments that are vague before it goes to land use control board?
All the outline process are all that. But if they're extremely vague, then they do have a condition that it goes to control of the site plan approval.
We can't hear her.
Yeah, could you stand up and use the mic here? We got a mic. I'm sure you can hear me and Scott just fine.
Oh, yeah.
Brenda's like.
A lot of, the outline plans are very non-specific. Normally they do go back to land use control board with notification to the neighborhood and for their site plan approval. And the site plan approval would include the building, the parking, landscaping, height, materials, all of that information that you're really wondering about. That would go to land use control board with an appeal to city council. I'm not sure that these conditions actually say that they're gonna go through that process.
Can you change, can y'all change it, y'all's will, how high the other things can be? If you got one that's 20, you could make a city in the middle of it's gonna be like a city. I mean, if the other ones are gonna be like townhouses, what measures y'all can't change and put more higher, you can higher. Not a 20-meter limit, but that's like a city. So it looks like
20-story building, ideally what we had talked about was that this is something that would address Ottoman Park. This is not something that all the buildings would be 20 stories. In some,
But you have, we have.
Does this fall under the 3.0 plan, so you
It
have a
does.
lot of flexibility?
build up, not out. That's Memphis 3.0.
Yeah, and it
And a
falls.
mix of uses.
And it falls under that plan, which gives the developer a lot of options without getting back to the public, right?
Well,
I mean, a lot, my lot, and your lot might be different, but.
yeah, Brenda, you could probably address that better than I can.
My apologies for being late. Brenda Solomito, Land Planning. I'm the planning consultant, on the project. I've been with you for years and years. I have been involved in developments in the Memphis regional area for over 30 years. And Cindy and I worked together on many successful projects that ended and were developed very well. The PD process, the plan development process, is purposely a stepped process, and it is also purposely built to have flexibility to accommodate market changes, governmental changes, and flexible neighborhood planning. So the outline plan was originally approved in 1987 for one purpose. It was for a typical mall with an associated office. There was only 2 uses were permitted. So the purpose of this application is to open up the uses to permit the service retail, other type of like restaurants, some shopping retail, but you're not gonna probably see a lot of that, office, and then the residential. This day and time, if you don't build in the full spectrum of uses, your significant development will not survive.
So y'all changed from, you're wanting to change from CMU 2 to CMU 3?
No,
No.
sir. No, that is not correct.
I
This has
thought
been,
I thought I saw that on the plan.
no, this has been a plan development since 1987 that basically permitted retail and office.
It was CMU 2.
I don't think CMU 2 existed.
It didn't exist in
1987.
1987.
It was some
But
commercial.
you're wanting
district.
CMU 3.
The Macy's property, which we are bringing into this plan development,
Yeah.
is currently zoned CMU 3,
And so-
as well as the properties
So-
across the street.
On what I read, it said CMU 3 with no special use permits necessary.
Yeah, so what we did is we took, so half of the site is Macy's. Macy's is, the land use there is controlled by CMU 3, which, it has a list of permitted uses and, a special use permit, I'm just saying the wrong thing. So like multifamily is a special use permit, hotels a special use permit. So we took the CMU 3 baseline to build in these additional uses.
And you, but it does state in that, it does state that CMU 3 with no special use permits.
For certain uses.
For
But it
the,
doesn't detail what those special
Yes,
uses.
yeah, it does. It specifically says in the,
It says what?
oh, here it is.
says the former CP uses,
Which is commercial.
what plan commercial,
Yeah, so that became CMU 2, I don't know what it's.
2011.
So what we did is we went through CMU 3, because that is the overriding zoning in this area. And so what we said is, any use permitted by right in the commercial mixed use district, CMU 3, the following additional uses are also permitted by right without a special use permit. Multifamily, personal care for the elderly, neighborhood arts center. So we go through, then we say the following uses are prohibited. So we went through the uses that are allowed in CMU 3, and we created a list and said, we don't want those. We don't want a gasoline station, we don't want a pawn shop, we don't want a freestanding vehicle wash, We certainly don't want adult entertainment establishments, a palmist, a smoke shop. So we went through CMU 3 and used that as a baseline.
So the things you don't want outright.
Yeah, that's right. It says the following uses are prohibited regardless.
If it's not prohibited, and it's in CMU 3, you can do it.
That's right.
So that.
So I'm gonna say one more thing, so we have full clarification about what this is. A planned development is a special use permit. So what you're doing, you're not changing zoning. When you make an application for a planned development, you're not changing the underlying zoning. What you're doing is you're requesting the equivalent of a special use permit to be able to tailor your uses towards what your development is. So for example, because Macy's was the CMU 3, and this was a planned development that allowed CP uses, which was CMU 2 plus office, and the changes in the code. Because the changes from 1987 CMU 3 and 2025 CMU 3, there's a big difference. So the ones that are particularly objectionable have been eliminated. So what we're,
I've looked through the list,
okay,
and the things that aren't limited, I would almost like to see you say, these are the things that we're gonna do, and the rest of it we're not doing. Because according to the list that's not on yours, you can do a fraternity or sorority or dormitory. You can use used goods, secondhand sales, which, would that be like a standalone Goodwill store? There could be an outdoor shooting range on the place. There can be as many hotels as you want. There could be a car sales floor. There's such a list of things under CMU 3 that you can do that's not prohibited on yours, that it gets kind of scary. It's like, there's as many things that you want to do that we probably wouldn't want you to do, but there's a lot that you want to do, we'd like for you to do. Yes?
Do I understand that this is gonna be not a lot of retail and restaurant, but more office and residential?
This will be a true mixed-use development, which would have ground floor retail. So if I could,
Will the retail be anything similar to Saddle Creek, or will it be different like?
Those are.
no, Mark. Yeah, so right now, for instance, this plan right here is about 180,000 square foot of ground floor commercial space, so retail space. Of that 180,000, if we had to develop this today, and the equity markets, we could go out and raise $175 million or $100 million in equity, and we could get the debt today. Half that retail would be retail shops, so similar to Saddle Creek and what Josh and his family developed the original Saddle Creek. And we're doing.
My dad, I can't think of it.
Okay, so Josh, I tried to say Josh and his family. So Josh's dad developed Saddle Creek, and they took that model around the country. And you all know what Saddle Creek was and is. It's those type of retailers. The other half would be what we call food and beverage. So sit-down restaurants, fast casual. So I know I'm using like industry terms. So fast casual would be like. Yeah, kind of like Panera, Chipotle. Those are the easy ones to recognize, and then what we do with, so that's the ground floor retail. Then above that, we would do apartments, we would do hotel, senior living is something that we, think Opus, right over here. Condo, because a lot of what we heard was this term of kind of aging in place in the neighborhood. So the ability to move from a 1 acre or half acre lot into something where you don't have to maintain a yard and that sort of thing, and stay in your neighborhood. And I missed the use, so apartments for rent. And what I said at the last meeting, and what we've consistently tried to say is, we really see these as being higher end apartments. So think Thornwood or the Landing downtown. Those are two properties that probably have the highest rents in the market, and those properties are attractive. The The landing is attractive because half of the building has unimpeded views of the Mississippi. And Thornwood was specifically designed to have 24-hour concierge service, and it specifically appeals to people in Germantown and surrounding communities who don't want to maintain their 5,000 square foot home anymore, and they want to move into an apartment where you can walk to all that great retail, coffee shop, Bella Vita. There was a couple of restaurants there.
This young lady's got a question.
I have a quick question. So the height restriction of 1987, what was it?
I believe it was 4 stories.
Okay, and why don't you have to adhere to that today?
Because we're going back through and amending the entire
I know,
plan
but how do
development.
you have the right to do that?
Well, because the existing plan development is always gonna give you what's there. Retail and office alone can't survive.
So Scott, if y'all don't mind, like, I mean, let me establish a vision. That's why I was up here. We got into the
Yeah, we
technical
did.
side.
Yeah, we got into the details.
Like, we won't see derailed, we got sidetracked. So, like Scott said, my dad and his partner Terry McEwen developed South Creek back in 1987. And so these lifestyle centers are what we developed across the country. And one of my first jobs at South Creek, we were working on South Creek in 1999, I was leasing agent. And at that point, Oak Court was actually pretty competitive with South Creek. And so tenants would come to town and they would look at, do we want to go to Oak Court, do we want to go to South Creek? That doesn't happen anymore. Because from the year 2000, like, and I can tell you exactly, I mean, that's a whole nother story, but exactly what happened up in the year 2000, the owners of the mall quit putting any money into it. And they just started riding it into the ground. And they were just milking it for cash flow. So great financial crisis happens in 2008, starts going downhill more. 2012, they tried to sell it. They tried to sell it for $40 million, and they couldn't do that. They couldn't find buyers. They found it, got it under contract twice, contracts fell through. So what they did was they went to the CMBS market, they went to the loan market, put a $40 million loan on it, and then threw it into their junk rate. Like, with the full intention just to milk it for cash. And so in 2014, that's when Washington Prime took over, and I was literally told by a senior person at Washington Prime, when I called him, I was like, we want to buy this in 2014. And we wanted to level at that point. He said, Josh, pick up the keys at the courthouse steps, the loan comes due in 2021. So from that point on, like, it was just like destroyed. And so in 2020, COVID hit, loans goes on default. It took until 2023 for the lender actually foreclosed on the asset. So of course, I'm picking up the phone and establishing, hey, we're interested in this, we want to buy this. But there are 2 competitors, and y'all can look them up. Their names are Namdar and Cohen. They have bought more than 150 malls around the country, out of like 900. So I mean, they own like over 15% of the total mall market in the country. And literally the first thing they do when they take over a mall, they fire security. You have a problem? Call the police. They fire their maintenance. They fire their landscaping. They milk it for cash. These are slumlords. And you can look them up. There are many articles on the internet about who these guys are. They were the ones that were competing with Hive. And so when we ended up winning the auction, but Namdar actually came to me afterwards and said, what did you do? Because we actually bid higher than you, but the lender awarded it to you. And that's because I spent the whole time talking to the lender about how if they sold it to Namdar and Cohen, they were gonna screw the city of Memphis. And they were gonna screw all of us as neighbors. And it was gonna be, the crime was gonna be 10 times worse. So when we started raising the money for Oak Court, like, I started going to local Memphians, neighbors, friends, etc. And I really thought I was gonna raise like 3 or 4, have 3 or 4 people come in, and then I would go to the national investors that we typically deal with to come into Memphis. But lo and behold, what ended up happening is that we have over 40 investment groups. And in those investment groups are multiple individuals. So over 60 individuals are the ones that bought Oak Court. And that is, all those are Memphis. Over half of those people live in the village of Bellmead. So I mean, these are our neighbors. I live in Bellmead. Hell, I've lived in the neighborhood for 52 years. And yes, I'm 52 years old. So, like, this is all about Memphis. That was what it was about, was protecting Memphis from what could be slum and blight. And on top of that, after we closed, Macy's called me up and was like, hey guys, we're gonna close, sorry we couldn't tell you before you bought, the mall, but we're gonna close our store, you wanna buy it? So of course I'm like, yeah, and so I made an offer of what I thought it should be, and we all agreed, and the investors agreed, this is what the number should be. Macy's like, no, we want close to double that. And we were like, all right, take a hike, see you later, because we were like, who's gonna invest in Memphis, who's gonna buy at Macy's? Well, a month later, I get a call from a broker saying, somebody wants to buy the Macy's and is offering more than double your price to do self-storage. Yeah, self-storage. So guess what the investors did again? We doubled our price to buy the Macy's to protect us. So that's the 60 people that, that invested in the beginning and this time around. These are all the neighbors that you're talking about, that we're all talking about. So this isn't just like, hey, we need to abide by what happened 40 years ago, because that's the mall. And the mall is still there. The mall is still operating. Like, we have been working on de-leasing malls so that we can put this step forward, but guess what? Like, I could sell this today and make a profit on this. I could call Pandora and Cohen. They actually told me that they offered more than we did. I mean, I could sell it to them immediately, but nobody wants a mall. Nobody wants that kind of slum, slum and blight on the property. And so that's why I was like, we're trying to come up with this, this vision for what we want. And so like Scott's doing a great job. I mean, it's a vertical mixed-use project. I mean, South Creek, what we call is Lifestyle 1.0. My dad developed as a strip center, essentially a fancy strip center, all the parking in the front. And then you had Lifestyle 2.0, where it was like main streets. And you had 3.0, which is what we did with Highland Road, and going vertical mixed use. And so this is that Highland Road on steroids. Yes, I mean, it's a lot more dense, but this is truly one of the best sites in Memphis. It's not too far west where you can't attract people from Germantown. It's not too far east where you can't attract people from Midtown. It is a great confluence and location for the city of Memphis. And so the city of Memphis, I mean, we all know this, has been knocked on its ass over the last few years. And so that's why we as investors and we as developers are trying to figure out what to do and how to improve Memphis. I mean, Dave, this goes back, I remember like, the reason we did Highland Road was that we went to a breakfast with Dr. Raines, and Dr. Raines told a story. She said that a Mississippi farmer comes to Memphis with a 17-year-old daughter. He drives up Gitlow, cuts over a Park, comes up Highland, and keeps driving. Then he goes to the University of Mississippi, and he sees this quaint town square, and he says, this is the place my daughter's going. And Dr. Raines said, this has nothing to do with the quality of the education of University of Mississippi or Memphis, but they're choosing it because of what's around the university. Who in this room could help us rebuild that? That was like 2003. And Highland Road finally opened in 2018. So it took us 12 years, and so that's when we're asking for, you're asking for specificity. Trust me, I have three daughters who are constantly asking me what retail's gonna be here. And I can't tell them because, I mean, like, it could change.
And I think we got bogged down in technicality for a second. And what I was wanting to try to do,
I just want to kind of interject here. Sounds great. The vision is great. None of us are against a beautiful, wonderful vision. Memphis 3.0, whatever, but not at the expense of harming an already vibrant neighborhood in any direction. Cutting down the trees and building on that burn, we're against that. We're not against mixed use, something wonderful that's hopefully better than the mall. That sounds terrific. But there are a lot of things in this vision that we're not sure about. So yeah, like I said, if it's a vision that we can all get on board with, that's great.
Yeah.
But you've got to listen to what everyone here is saying and their concerns.
100% agree, and that's why we're here. Like, I mean, this is like, again, we had a bunch of voluntary meetings, and one required meeting was last week. This is again, like, we're here to listen because you are our neighbors. Like, I live in the neighborhood. And Jack, we may disagree, but we live straight apart. And I was actually walking by your house the other day. You didn't know that, but I wasn't looking.
But
Yes, like I am your neighbor, and this is why we do wanna listen, we want your feedback, and I mean, we're big boys, this is what we do for a living, so that's why we're here taking it, I appreciate that.
Start
I
with
would
this
love
one.
to have, Saddle Creek, I think we would enjoy, go out to Velveeta, and I just was in that coffee shop, 4 days ago. That'd be great, but that's not nothing out there is 20-story high. Yeah, that's the big problem.
So let's take a couple of questions real quick, and then let's kind of get back on target, so.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my question, which,
Okay.
what is the current height limitation in CMU three zoning?
I don't know.
That's kind of.
Well, that's an important question.
I mean, high rise is
planning?
pretty good setting.
Two experts.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm in Winslow, homeowners, and we have a problem, I mean, we can all agree that the mall is fairly, the traffic is not heavy there. However, at Christmas time, we have a very difficult time getting in and out of our development right there.
We have one driveway
Well,
in
it
and
goes
out,
right by Poplar.
and we're landlocked.
I don't know how the traffic study is going to impact, I know y'all said that there was a reference to the traffic study, but we don't have an entrance unless we can make an agreement with First Horizon, but we're gonna have a pretty big problem, and I think the side streets will be picking up too. So I just didn't know when that was gonna be done and what if now's where we need to start looking at how we can get in and out of there, because I'm sure they're not gonna put another light there, and the
Even-
flow of traffic is gonna be pretty massive if you're
We're-
doing 400 to 600 private residents.
We're neighbors, and even now, it is difficult at rush hour to turn left onto Poplar. We have one driveway. It's a couple yards west of the First Horizon exit. And it's very difficult at rush hour either to turn left out or to turn left in. And that, if you're adding another 1,000+ cars per day with retail and customers.
At what point in this plan do y'all plan to expect to do
Well, it already
a
stalls
traffic?
right
Let me
there.
segue into that, and then let's let Josh kind of answer that. So, kind of what we were just talking about the traffic flow. The other thing so we had 3 points and then we had a 4th point. The 4th point we kind of got bogged down into with the technicality of everything, which I'd like to come back to after the other 3. But the 3rd point that we were all concerned about was the option to close Oak Court Drive. And Scott said the other day that they probably weren't gonna do it, but that would mean they probably might not do it. So, I don't really.
Can I just correct that?
Sure.
I said we had zero intention of closing it. However, I'm here to say, this issue has caused so much confusion, and that's probably on us. So we take responsibility for that. That is being stricken from the application. So it's out. We're not doing anything with it right now. We're not doing a thing. So and at the risk of beating a dead horse, the application said we reserve the right to privatize. And again, that was a procedural closure. Again, we're taking it off the table. It's caused too much. We have never intended to close it. It was only to privatize it so that we could have control and do improvements on it as that might make sense in the future. We're taking it out of the application. It would have to go back through, if we wanted to do anything with it, it would have to go back through this entire process, which is what we had that would have had to go through that process anyway. We're taking it off the table. It has caused too much consternation and confusion, and I take responsibility for that. The messaging was not good.
Yeah. So I think that you've kind of got the root of this. I mean, you can tell how vehemently everybody is against taking the berm down. Everybody on Cherry Road, and most of the people in the village are against that happening to us too. So, you know, and I'm gonna say this, where you live, from our backyard, 11 feet up to the beginning of the berm, then 18 feet above that, put in a 45-foot townhome at the street level, we're gonna be looking up at 55+ feet at our backyard. I don't think anybody's got a 55 to 60-foot building sitting on their property line in the village or the building or and we're not here today. So the berm, what we can figure out on that building and come to some kind of agreement with that. And then high rise. And then what you just said about Cherry Road, I mean, Oak Court Drive, that's great. And then the rest of it is just kind of technically, what are we doing with all this stuff? How do we figure out where you're going? Because I mean, I got just so many questions about all this that I'm sure y'all can answer.
Right.
But I got a lot of questions. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Yes, sir.
It seems to me that what we've got here is almost like what Nancy Pelosi said. We've got to see we've got to pass it to see what's in it. And, we're not gonna this is development, and you have to understand exactly what developments are. There are people who invest to make money, and their way of making money is to increase density in the number of units and what's there. And when you increase density, you also increase traffic. And when you increase traffic, you increase crime. We do not have in Belmead, the village, I think the last I heard from the police department was we had 3 officers. That's not enough. We've got burglaries and break-ins right now, and we have people in Belmead, most, not all, pay $85 a month to have a private security.
And I think we all have that same security.
And so, I've been told the last meeting, I understood that the density or the traffic was a number of about 2,000 people. That's automatically going to increase the density, and the crime in this area. I'm opposed to that. Our mayor, on the other hand, told us not too long ago with a complaint about AI that he wanted to increase the density, increase the tax base. So I suspect that the land use control board is probably gonna go along with the mayor, to improve this development, to increase the tax base. I've asked, Mr. Poe, he and our neighbors, we disagree. I've lived in the neighborhood for 50 years. Been through all of the development, including the first one, where we opposed the hotel, we opposed the movie house, we opposed the elevation. That's why they had the parking garage, low level the way it was. It didn't affect, the property owners. But,
Well, I think I probably should have prefaced this at the very beginning. I am pro-development. I think most of us here are pro-good development that creates good neighbors. I am not anti-development at all. I'm all on that side. There's just too many unknowns at this point when there's those, well now, we've got 2 major issues, not
I just
3.
raised a question.
Yes, sir.
I posed the question, how is this going to help or improve the, property values and the people in the area? I can see how you say it might help the city increase the tax base, how it might help the developer make money, but how is it going to, affect the property owners and not decrease our property values?
That's a really good question.
Memphis 3.0 specifically says that along with the up, y'all haven't said, along with the up, not out, you haven't said that it's not to decrease the property values. And I'd like to know from somebody here if you can do it. I don't think you can.
I can tell you a little bit.
To improve or help the property values and how it won't decrease.
I can help you a little bit on that. Like I said, I live on Cherry Road. I'm a real estate broker. Been doing this for about 35 years. And we have a house for sale on the opposite side of the street from us. I talked to one of the agents the other day it's just sitting there. It's not getting any movement at all. And she told me they're gonna have to reduce the price because they're a little, right now, not getting any traction on it because they're concerned about what's gonna happen, that they're gonna be seeding across the street. So it's not gonna help us doing that in our backyard. A thought-out plan that gives you a buffer and a barrier from what it's gonna be does help. That does. But just sticking it so it's visible throughout the community, and a high-rise building that's gonna be on our side of it. When we talked the first time, you were saying that it probably was gonna be where the offices were. That changed at the meeting yesterday. And you were talking about it being on the far east side. Or across the bottom.
We've always figured that the place for that optimally would be along this southern edge, looking out to Ottoman Park.
Did
Now-
we talk about it being in this building right here, because you might want to tear the office a little bit down?
Well, this plan shows
Yeah.
a building here. But as we talked about, this is kind of the contingency plan. If for some reason we decide to get rid of the office, which we're not doing.
Where on that plan?
The current plan.
Yes.
Where on that plan is it to?
I mean, just to clarify, like, to say again, like, y'all are asking for specificity when you can't offer. Like, and so that's where, like, I mean, I'm pointing to David as he's sneaking out of the room. But when we first worked on Highland Road, the reason I'm telling you that story is that we bought the land in 2007. We didn't start construction until 2013. And so when you're talking about, like, and I mentioned this to Cindy, if we had started this 6 years ago in 2019, we would have loaded this up with office. Now, office you can't touch with a 10-foot pole anywhere in the country. So that's where, like, we're coming up with ideas, but we don't have that specificity.
I thoroughly believe you when you say you're a well-located apartment building. Markets change, we just talked about it.
Right.
But the open in 10 years, that you can decide what to do. I heard you on how it took you a while to find it. But for us to sit there for 10 years worrying this on that, that's a stretch.
Well, the idea is that, I mean, like, until then, like, assuming we get these approvals, then we'll demolish them all, until at least we'll have a vacant site there. And so the concerns about traffic, et cetera, would be alleviated until that happens. This one.
Just like y'all have eliminated a lot of things that could be in the CMU, could you not state a much lower height than a potential 20-story? I understand this is a placeholder, you know, but that's just about as bad as townhomes being in Jody's backyard. Can you not place a specified, it won't be any higher than, you know, you talked the other day about, the hotel might be something along the lines of the Memphian, that kind of thing. Could y'all change it to specify a much lower maximum height?
It's interesting because it's a good question. And the Memphian, as an example, is 8 stories. And we were meeting with the brokers on the Memphian the other day. They were sharing that they underbuilt by probably at least 2 stories because they have more demand than they had imagined. And, you know, that probably should have been a 10-story hotel. I think they only did 150 rooms or 120 rooms,
But they said that now the Beth Bar, which is their metric for how successful a hotel is the most successful hotel in Memphis, exceeding anything downtown.
So, and I think there's some confusion on this, and maybe it will alleviate, I hope it's gonna alleviate some minds, but, with the hope, I mean, the, apartment control for new development or not control and versus subsidized housing, and that there was some gray area in the last meeting that we said it wasn't gonna be, Section 8, sorry,
Yep.
It's the hope initiative, it's called Section 8, like, Section 8 housing, but that there would be some rent with this, or something, I wasn't following, but I know that there's been some muddled talk about that, and I just didn't know what the facts were.
So here's how, there's a thing there's 2 different pilots in Memphis. One is to attract businesses, the other one is to incentivize new development, specifically multifamily development, where the real estate taxes for the multifamily are abated, and as a requirement for that abatement, so it gets reduced for a period of time, 20% of the units have to be, the language used to be reserved, but now I think it's held for little a affordable. And when big A affordable is something called low-income housing tax credits. That's a whole different thing. We would never do that here. We can't do that here. It's very competitive. You can't even do it downtown. So basically 20% of the units. So here's some rough math. So let's say there's 200 apartment units. 40 of those units would have to be reserved for 80% of the area median income. So what that means is that there's a calculation, and effectively what that means is for a one-bedroom apartment, the 80% limit is $1,265 a month. So if I make 80% of the area median income, I could go to them, I could go to the apartment and say, hey, here's my income statement. They would have to offer me that apartment for $1,265 a month. For a 2-bedroom, it's like $1,550 a month, which is, you know, it is, but it's not bottom of the barrel rents. That's only if you go through this whole process with the edge board of getting a pilot. We're not asking for that, we're not doing that, we're not. We have not, because we don't have a plan to show the city. Yeah. But to make it economically feasible, sometimes we have to look at those things. Yes, ma'am.
Honestly, it's hard to hear it while looking at the picture of the comments about that side of my dad's shoulder. Because I can see my parents' yard that I grew up in and that I want a house to be near in the village. On that plan, and I really am curious, like that is the only specific thing I'm seeing. Like that's the only labeled item. So why exactly have you decided that's where the townhomes want to be with the big view of builders and make my parents' backyard? Like why are they here? Why are the townhomes specifically right there?
Why is that the only thing that's decided? Is that what you're?
Like no, why are they there? Like why like they're specific. So you just want like my dad's playing good cop. Like I think he's much more upset about this than he's letting on. I'm upset about this because I live down the street and I grew up in this house. But I just like, is it to take advantage of our backyards? Just like they're like it's just gonna ruin the nature of their.
They get to look at our backyards.
Yeah.
But we have to look
Well, we
back
have to
at
start
that.
a retaining wall and.
Kind of like what we were talking about initially about the apartments, because if you, the park, but the park has to look at the apartments.
It's like, it's ruining the nature of the neighborhood and the homes and residences that are there.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't live on Cherry, there are no people who do. How much is the success for this whole thing based on having those townhouses? If you just kept that a
Or
green
can they just be
space,
put somewhere else, anywhere else?
could you, I mean, I realize that, you know, there's, you selling and, rents or whatever it may be. But if you just eliminated doing anything in that green space, how much would that affect your placeholder plan and then eventual?
So that is
Getting
actually a
people.
great question, and it does answer your question too, is that like, if we were looking at this, the main 26 acres, is that 26? 27, okay, the main parcel is where the value is really driven, that's where the retail is, the high density mixed use. When we started this, I mean, one was we wanted to make sure that we weren't doing commercial back there, because I know it'd be the absolute, that would be a nightmare. Thomas would be up here being nice to me right now, different types of commercial. But
If it was one story, I might be nicer than I am now, but I don't know. Go ahead.
But the idea was that, cause we also heard feedback, from the neighbors, what?
Not the people.
It was feedback from neighbors on Cherry, that, one house had multiple break-ins from people jumping over the back fence. One
Do you
guy
know who that
actually-
was?
I'm not calling people out.
Okay.
One was a guy that actually saw police sirens about 3 years ago with walking along his back fence, and because somebody got shot at the mall and died on his back fence. on one of his
That
houses.
never happened.
So,
That-
that was the action.
That didn't happen.
That did not happen.
That didn't happen.
Did not happen.
That's,
Alright, so we've been.
that's not
And
true.
I don't think.
Hey, I got a second here.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
This does make me angry.
Okay, and at the very beginning of this, I should have said, we all need to be respectful and polite, and I need to be respectful and polite too. So I'm sorry if we interrupted, let's not interrupt each other, and you go right ahead, Josh.
All right, appreciate that. So, the idea from a good design, I mean, I understand from the neighborhood standpoint, like where y'all are coming from, but the idea from the design standpoint was that by protecting this with a gated community, similar to what you have with Woodlands, you're actually not creating a ton of density on that side, and you're protecting, the village's flank. You're keeping people from being able to get over the fence. I mean, like, I think most fences now have barbed wire on top of them, don't they?
Some do, some don't.
So that was the idea behind it. Like, I'm not saying like I'm not pushing back and saying this is a hard line to say, because I mean, it is a good question. This is like, what is the value here? And honestly, the value of that land for these townhomes is probably $2 to $3 million. So, I mean, it's not like the end all be all for the whole project.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the one question I have is, okay, if you can come up with a water abatement plan so that the rain won't flood down Cherry Road, and you can even work on the traffic, the one question I have is what's the plan for noise abatement? In other words, you know, I live on Woodmere, so I'm 3 blocks west, I'm more insulated, but I realize the people on Cherry Road are not as much, and if these apartment things along the west side of Oak Court Drive go ahead, will that lead to a great increase in noise 24/7 to where people on Cherry Road who have, relatively speaking, enjoy, you know, some crime problems, but for the most part, reasonable peace and quiet, will that be a thing of the past? Will they just be bombarded with a much higher level of noise in their neighborhoods than they heretofore have had to deal with?
You know the answer to that. You've got 28 townhomes, and you've got double that number of people. There's gonna be people coming and going all the time. But I do want to compliment you on one thing. When you took over the mall, you put a police station in there, I guess is what you all did, or got a substation or something?
Not really, but like we spent a ton of money to
We've
redo
had-
that security.
We've had no crime. I mean, and so, before we all start yelling and getting wacky, no, that is a false story about the guy dying on the road, that never happened. And I think that it kinda got blown out of proportion about the house that's broken into multiple times, because I think I know the family that we're talking about, I see the husband here, but not the wife. So, we've all had crime problems, just like everyone in Memphis does, but this, like this man said right here, this is gonna impact our quality of life to the point that after almost 40 years, we're not gonna be able to live there. And that's a pretty sad situation. And what you just said just now is pretty much the same thing you and I talked about the first time that we met. We talked, we discussed what was gonna go over the burn. And you said, that's not where my money is.
Right.
And then, so that's, you kind of leave that there for the time being, and we'll talk about that then. Yes, sir. Let's let her, then you know.
I think probably what a lot of people in here object to, and even the 3.0 plans, addresses this, is that this is not in keeping with the character of our neighborhood. 200-foot buildings, car dealership, I mean, I just think there are some things that you could do as planners that would make this room a lot happier. I mean, you could limit it to 8 to 10 stories. You could eliminate a car dealership. You could lower those townhouses to 45 feet. You know, that's not a very saleable market now. Nobody wants to walk up and down steps, so those could be a lot lower. There's just a lot of things that they could do as planners that would make the neighbors much happier, and it would be in keeping with what we have and what we've had. I've lived here, my family's lived here 75 years, so I know what it feels like to live here, and the canopy is unbelievable. So we want to keep that feel.
Nathan?
Quick question, because I know it's been brought up before, maximum number of residential, and I think previously you've mentioned 600 is kind of what you were looking at for maximum number?
We're not looking for a maximum number.
Okay. The, at what point in this plan, from here in the next 10 years, at what point does the traffic flow,
Traffic impact study?
yeah, when that study happens, and how would that affect, would it increase, decrease, would it set a number for you on what your residential, would it affect what this plan is, and if, let's say, those townhouses get built or not?
So traffic impact study would be part of a final plan, because then you know the exact uses, square footages, et cetera. Because then it goes through this generator that tells you how much traffic, and it also takes into account, I think I explained this at the last meeting, something called shared parking, because the office and the retail have different peak hours than hotel and multifamily and condo and townhomes. So, that's all part of that equation. And ultimately, the traffic impact study goes to the city. City engineers review that and say, yes, the current, signaling, lane widths, et cetera, can support this, or it can't. And if it can't, here's what you need to do to support it. Lane widening, additional signals, et cetera. So it becomes this balance of, well, shoot, we don't wanna spend 20 or $30 million on traffic improvements to justify this. So the density is really ultimately constrained by the ability to park it. And I think I explained this last time, parking's expensive, because it's all gonna mostly have to be structured parking. And it's gonna be really dictated by traffic and frankly, other infrastructure. Do we have the sewer capacity? Do we have the water capacity? Do we have the electrical capacity? These are all things that ultimately the final plan, we're gonna have to work with MLGW, with city engineering, with traffic.
So basically, we're not gonna be able to tell what we're talking.
Do you have any estimate of what?
Am I wrong in any of that? JT, Lindsay, Cindy, Brenda?
All of that, though, I'm just asking, do you have a rough estimate of what your residential density would, how many people do you expect? How many homes, houses, people living there?
It depends on what year you're asking.
So you have no idea of what, do you have even a starting number? What you would plan to have? Any idea?
I know you're asking for specificity. but
Not even
honestly,
specificity, just an estimate.
Let me
Okay.
ask a question real
Sure.
quick. Let me
I wish I could tell you, because I wish that the market in Memphis right now was so robust that we were rolling right into development. It's not right now, and that's just the reality. But we're trying to do our due diligence to get a good mixed use here that includes all those different uses. It could be 200 apartments, it could be 900.
Ultimately, could that
We're
affect
getting ready to
the
lose our
town?
audience because we're hitting 7 o'clock, so I wanna run through something real quick and then make a suggestion. We just wrap it up from there. So, yes, ma'am.
So I lived through this before. We moved from Atlanta just a few years ago. And about 2017 in our neighborhood, this kind of thing was proposed and frankly in development right now. What we heard in those early meetings 7, 8 years ago is not what is unfolding. So we are signing up for something that is still a work in progress.
As that building, you can see.
And the question I have is around the mixed use part. One of the things, maybe I just missed it, but I didn't hear you say, included in this mixed use is medical care and or a professional office. Is that part of the idea that there could be, you know, a Baptist satellite office or something of the sort? Attorney's offices, CPA?
Well, yeah, because part of our plan keeps this 120,000 square foot office. Office is a key component of this. And I've said this before, is when this is done and done well with restaurants and retail, this office is, I mean, we're leasing up the office now. We're de-leasing the mall. So that office is only gonna improve when this development happens. So yes, we intend for office to be a key part of this, absolutely.
So we all have questions about a lot of stuff, and I just want to kind of run through a short list. I don't want to ask questions about it. I just want to kind of run through a list. And I'm not asking the question, I'm just kind of making a statement. Finance concept A, got long linear buildings, parking, future parking garages, but does not show us where the main street is. Could be located within the parking and the buildings, or is it just one lawn area for gathering space? Because we talked about having gathering spaces. Concept B does not show any gathering spaces or the main location. The alpha symbols stand for numbers, but they really don't explain anything. The roof plan, the spirit plan, show the majority of the buildings being 5 stories tall, maybe 1 10-story building, 240 foot would be out of character. You can put things in there that we talked about that they aren't really intended to put in, but you can put them in. You can put in fraternity homes, you can use used goods, outdoor shooting range, which would be really cool in our backyard, I'm sure. How many hotels can we have? If you want a car sales showroom and associated services, vehicle charging, that should be on the footprint. What type of car sales? Why is the site plan review not required if the final plat conforms to the outline plan because the concept plan does not show enough information to be able to support a final plat? I mean, there's just a list of questions. I got another page for them. And you can just go through them because there's a lot of things that are vague. So my suggestion is that I don't think this thing is ready to go in front of land use control board. I think that unless we can get some kind of an agreement put together, I think that I'd like to kick it back to you and say, let's push it through and sit down with representatives of the community and let's figure out what we're gonna do before the 12th and reach some sort of a more concrete structured idea before it actually gets in front of you. Because once it goes through them, we really don't have much.
So I should have said this earlier, but when I was talking about the investors, so I'm the point here. So I'm the one that's like leading the investment group, but I have a board of 5 people. I'm one of them that I report to. I talked to this afternoon to tell them about this meeting and to come back to tomorrow and report back on how the conversations went. And we have a greater investment group, and so I mean, this is something I'll take back. But like we're listening, and I want to continue these conversations.
Do you have that list, Thomas?
I can get it to you, I'll email it to you. Yeah, I'll be glad to. But yeah, there's a whole list of stuff. So you're gonna take this back to them and you're gonna tell them that we had a fairly decent room full of people here today that supported the 3 major things. Each one of them is the focus of Oak Court trial, which you're not gonna do. And then everybody is a little concerned about the vagueness of all this. Also, you probably need to tell them that this is a small portion of the people that I've heard from. These are the people who could just be here tonight. So it is a vast and organized group of people that are opposed to it in this present state. I'd love to sit down with you and let's get some communities together and let's talk about, with your board or whoever, about how we can adjust, make changes, and come up with a plan that is, when I talked to Ron Ellis the other day, he said, man, a good development is a good neighbor. And that's what we all want to be. We want y'all to be a good development, we want to be good neighbors as well.
So he sold out to the group, but then drove them all to the ground.
Yeah, that's good.
But let's not talk about let's not talk about the latter part. Let's talk about the original.
Yeah.
So the original plan with Ron Bell's and all with Jack at that point. But the original plan with everybody was to be good neighbors. Let's work together to make it something we can all work with. And I've got to agree with that. I think that we need to work together to make it what we all can be happy and comfortable and keep the integrity of what we are right now. The neighborhood that we are. Yes, sir.
I have one request. I would like, whatever this is done here, to be required that the neighbors get written notice. I'm here right now because someone put a flyer in my mailbox and I got it 2 hours ago before I came. Didn't know there was gonna be any. So I'm not getting notice. And I had no idea.
That brings up one more question. Who did you talk to over at Protect that gave you this?
We didn't talk to Protect. Somebody forwarded the holiday email list from the neighborhood to us.
Because we can't get to this. So,
It's the email that went out.
Could you repeat that again? Could you repeat what you just said? I didn't hear it. I just didn't hear what you said.
It was a holiday email that went out, I think, it got forwarded. We were talking with some neighbors, said, hey, we'd like to get in contact with some neighbors. They said, here's the best way to contact them. Here's the email that went out around Christmas time. It said, happy holidays. It had two Yeah, not one.
Yes, under the guidelines, ordinances, and what the city does, it states a 500-foot to the boundaries of the residence. Yes, the people over here in the villages, that's 500 feet, but it affects many of us on the north side of the hopper also. So, I got a notice in the mail 2 hours ago also.
And
So I'm thinking the
some
500
people
foot
live in
rule.
Bellmead, some people live in Laurelwood,
Yeah.
this will impact everybody. So this is a community thing, it's not just, because if you come 500 feet from this property, you're just getting on the other side of Cherry Road, that's it, you're not getting the village at all. Yes, sir.
This gentleman, and I don't know your name, but.
Scott.
Scott, you were talking about, you wish that we had a robust economy in Memphis and people were banging down the doors. We could do that, this room is full of influential people. Our number one problem in this city is crime. And we have some terrible politicians in this city. And we need to get the big dogs in this town to pull together and get our city straight. Okay? That's the number one problem. You could get more money for each one of your condos, double the price of the condo, and build a 5-story building and keep Thomas happy. And instead of thing bringing $1 million, it could bring $2 million. And if y'all would fix that, a lot of these problems would go away. And right now, Cash Patel's talking about giving our city $20 billion, which is an insane number. But if someone that could get in there and get all the crooks out of politics and spend the money correctly, we could start this stuff out.
I'd like to nominate you for mayor.
So when is the next meeting?
So here's the situation for everybody. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock is your final deadline to get anything in writing or to get anything at all registered for the Department of Planning and Development. Get it over to them, and then, it should be, everybody should probably have an address on where to email or where to call Corey Christensen. She's the planner for this. After tomorrow, then the next meeting is in front of the Land Use Control Board on the 12th. And that's it. So that's the reason I'm calling for requesting that we get together and try to figure out before we get to that spot. Because once it gets there, if the politicians, if the people are, if it's not able on the front end, when it gets there, we can't.
I got a great question. How tall is the tallest building in Saddle Creek?
25 feet.
How far? How tall?
25 feet maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and you're asking us for 240 feet? And sending us examples of Saddle Creek commercial? Do we have stupid on our forehead, Josh?
Well,
okay.
We must know, okay, we must have stupid.
Well, actually, I need to say this, is Thomas and I worried that there would be no snide remarks and everybody would be respectful, so now that the gentleman's crossed the threshold, we're done. Thank you.
Thank
Hey.